Have you ever felt like God left out some pretty important details when He called you to something? Maybe you stepped into a new season of life, a ministry opportunity, or even a relationship, only to discover challenges that made you think, if I had known this was going to be part of the package, I might have thought twice. Today, we're going to explore one of the most perplexing aspects of walking with God, why He sometimes withholds information that seems like it would have been really helpful to know up front. This isn't about God being deceptive or withholding good things from us. Scripture reveals something far more profound about how divine wisdom operates in our lives. And understanding this principle will transform how you navigate unexpected difficulties in your faith journey. When we examine how God reveals His plans throughout Scripture, we discover a consistent pattern that might surprise you. God is incredibly detailed about some things while remaining completely silent about others. Take Abraham's calling, for instance. God gives him specific promises about land, descendants, and blessing, but He doesn't mention that this journey will require leaving everything familiar, facing famine in the promised land, or navigating complex family dynamics that would challenge his faith for decades. Moses receives detailed instructions about the tabernacle. God specifies everything down to the type of wood and the color of the curtains. Yet when it comes to the 40 years in the wilderness, God simply says they'll wander until a generation passes away. The specifics of daily survival, leadership challenges, and spiritual rebellion aren't part of the initial briefing. Jesus operates the same way with His disciples. He tells them they'll be His witnesses to the ends of the earth, but He doesn't explain that this will involve prison, persecution, and martyrdom for most of them. He mentions they'll face troubles in this world, but He doesn't provide a detailed syllabus of what those troubles will look like. This selective revelation isn't accidental or arbitrary. God's wisdom operates on principles that serve our spiritual development in ways we might not initially understand. Scripture teaches us that God reveals truth progressively, giving us what we need when we need it, not necessarily when we want it. In John 16:12, Jesus tells His disciples, "I have much more to say to you, more than you can now bear. But when He, the Spirit of truth, comes, He will guide you into all the truth." Notice what Jesus is acknowledging here. There's more information available, but the timing of revelation matters. The disciples weren't ready for certain truths yet. Their capacity to receive and process some realities needed to develop first. This principle appears throughout Scripture. The Israelites received the law after experiencing God's deliverance, not before. David was anointed king years before he actually took the throne, learning lessons in caves and through conflict that would shape his leadership. Paul spent years in Arabia after his conversion, receiving revelation that would later transform the early church. God understands that certain information, given at the wrong time, can overwhelm us, discourage us, or cause us to make decisions based on fear rather than faith. His timing in revelation is always perfect, even when it doesn't feel that way to us. Let's look at a fascinating example from Genesis that illustrates this principle. When Abraham's servant goes to find a wife for Isaac, he travels to Mesopotamia with specific instructions and divine guidance. The journey is successful. He finds Rebekah and she agrees to return with him. But here's what's interesting. Nowhere in the account does God warn the servant about the dangers of ancient travel, the possibility that Rebekah's family might refuse, or the cultural complexities he'd have to navigate. Instead, God provides what the servant needs when he needs it: divine guidance at the well, wisdom in his conversation with Laban, and favor that opens doors. The servant doesn't receive a comprehensive briefing about every challenge he'll face, but he receives real-time guidance that proves sufficient for each moment. This teaches us something crucial about how God operates in our lives. He doesn't always give us the full blueprint up front, but He promises to provide guidance wisdom, and strength as we need it. His grace is sufficient for each day, each challenge, each unexpected turn in the road. But why would a loving God withhold information that might help us prepare? Several profound reasons emerge from Scripture. First, some knowledge would paralyze us with fear. If Moses had known all the details of Pharaoh's resistance, the wilderness wandering, and the people's constant complaints, would he have accepted the calling? If the disciples had known the full cost of following Jesus from day one, would they have left their nets? God knows that we often need to be committed to a path before we can handle knowing all its difficulties. Our commitment, born from initial faith and inspiration, becomes the foundation that sustains us through later revelations of cost. Second, premature knowledge can lead to premature solutions. When we know about problems in advance, we often try to solve them in our own strength before God's timing. Abraham and Sarah knew they would have descendants, but when the promise seemed delayed, they tried to fulfill it through Hagar. Their advanced knowledge led to premature action that created complications for generations. Third, some revelations require spiritual maturity to process correctly. A young believer might be crushed by certain truths about spiritual warfare that a mature believer can handle with wisdom and prayer. God reveals truth at the pace our spirits can bear it. God's selective revelation serves a crucial purpose in developing our faith. When we step out in obedience based on what we know and then encounter unexpected challenges, we're faced with a choice. Will we trust God's character and promises despite the surprises, or will we retreat? This is exactly what happened to the Israelites at the edge of the Promised Land. They had 40 years of seeing God's faithfulness in the wilderness. They had the promises, they had the track record, they had the evidence of divine provision. But when they saw the giants, the unexpected detail that hadn't been part of their original briefing, they had to choose whether their faith was strong enough to handle surprises. 10 of the 12 spies let the unexpected information override their faith. They essentially said, if we had known about these giants, we never would have believed God could give us this land. But Joshua and Caleb demonstrate mature faith. The land is good, just as God promised. These giants don't change God's character or His promises. If anything, overcoming them will display God's power even more dramatically. This is the faith development strategy at work. God allows us to encounter unexpected challenges not to discourage us, but to give us opportunities to choose faith over fear, trust over retreat, and divine promises over visible obstacles. James tells us to consider it pure joy when you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. The key word here is testing, not punishment, not abandonment, but testing. Like gold refined in fire, our faith is purified and strengthened through unexpected challenges. When God withholds certain information about future difficulties, He's not setting us up for failure. He's creating opportunities for our faith to grow beyond what it would be if we knew everything in advance. There's a difference between faith that says, I trust God because I understand His plan completely, and faith that says, I trust God even when His plan includes surprises I didn't see coming. The second type of faith is infinitely more powerful and resilient. It's the faith that can weather any storm because it's rooted in God's character rather than our understanding of circumstances. One of the most mature aspects of faith is learning to be comfortable with mystery. Western culture trains us to want full disclosure, complete information, and detailed plans. But God often calls us to walk in faith before understanding, to step forward based on His promises rather than our comprehension. Abraham is called the father of faith, not because he understood everything God was doing, but because he believed God's promises even when the path was unclear. By faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. This doesn't mean we throw wisdom out the window or ignore practical planning. It means we hold our need for complete information loosely, trusting that God's timing in revelation is perfect, even when it feels insufficient to us. Here's what God does promise when He withholds detailed information about future challenges: His presence. "I will never leave you nor forsake you. And lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you." God's promise isn't that we'll avoid all difficulties or that we'll know about them all in advance. His promise is that we'll never face them alone. His presence is the constant that remains steady even when circumstances surprise us. Moses didn't know all the details of leading Israel, but God promised, "My presence will go with you and I will give you rest." David didn't know all the challenges he'd face as king, but he could say, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." This is the trade-off God offers: less information, but more presence. And when we really understand who God is, that's a remarkable deal. So how do we apply this understanding to our daily walk with God? Here are several practical ways to embrace God's wisdom in selective revelation. First, develop comfort with uncertainty. When God calls you to something new, a career change, a ministry opportunity, a relationship, don't demand to know every detail before you step forward. Ask for wisdom, seek counsel, but be willing to move forward based on what you know of God's character and calling rather than complete information about future challenges. Second, build your faith on God's promises rather than your circumstances. When unexpected difficulties arise, return to what God has promised. His promises don't change based on new information that surprises you. If He called you to something, He will provide what you need to fulfill that calling. Third, view surprises as opportunities for spiritual growth rather than evidence of God's unfaithfulness. When you encounter the giants that no one told you about, remember that they're opportunities to demonstrate and develop faith, not reasons to retreat. Fourth, practice gratitude for God's timing in revelation. Sometimes what feels like withheld information is actually protected information. Details that would have overwhelmed you if you'd known them earlier. Trust that God reveals what you need when you need it. Ultimately, God's selective revelation serves an eternal purpose that extends far beyond our immediate comfort or understanding. He's not just getting us through temporary difficulties. He's developing eternal character, faith, and relationship with Him. The challenges we face, including the unexpected ones, are tools in God's hands to shape us into the image of Christ. This process requires both inspiration and testing, both promises and surprises, both clarity and mystery. When we understand this eternal perspective, we can face unexpected difficulties with confidence. They're not accidents or oversights in God's plan. They're integral parts of a process designed to develop us into the people God created us to be. The next time you encounter a challenge that makes you think, "Nobody told me this would be part of following God," remember that you're in good biblical company. Abraham faced famines he didn't expect. Moses dealt with rebellions he didn't anticipate. David fought enemies he hadn't planned for. The disciples encountered persecution they hadn't foreseen. But in every case, God's grace proved sufficient. His strength was made perfect in their weakness. His presence sustained them through difficulties they never could have imagined handling on their own. God hasn't changed. The same divine wisdom that guided Abraham, Moses, David, and the disciples is available to guide you. The same divine strength that sustained them through unexpected challenges will sustain you through yours. Don't let the surprises derail your faith. Let them deepen it. Don't let the mysteries discourage you. Let them draw you closer to the one who sees the whole picture, even when you only see a small part. Your journey with God will include surprises, some delightful, some challenging, but none of them will surprise God. He knows exactly what you need to develop the faith, character, and relationship with Him that He desires for you. Trust His timing, trust His wisdom, trust His presence, and keep moving forward, knowing that the one who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion, surprises and all. The giants in your promised land aren't there to defeat you. They're there to reveal the greatness of the God who goes before you. Step forward in faith and watch Him prove Himself faithful once again.